Zack Snyder's Justice League is the only version of Justice League to exist. There was no version that came out in 2017 that the studio may be heavily meddled with after the director had to step down due to a personal tragedy. There's no version of Justice League where the studio would ever do something that gross, like hire a guy who made the Avengers to come in and add in more jokes through reshoots and completely structurally change a lot of the movie, and then have to spend a lot more money on that, creating ultimately a bigger flop that only made fans even more displeased, wanting them to release the Snyder Cut as it was spread all over Twitter, and eventually they gave in to release this one. There's no version like that. It's just this version of Justice League. No other one. You guys already know what the plot of this movie is, but more than that, you probably already know all of the behind-the-scenes drama with Zack Snyder having to step down because of, unfortunately, his daughter committing suicide. He had to step down to be with his family. He was also fighting the studio to have a lot of his vision remain in the movie because a lot of the studio execs were pretty worried after the box office returns of both Man of Steel and then also Batman v Superman. That movie, of course, famously did not reach $1 billion at the box office worldwide, and they were kind of banking on that. So, of course, to not have that happen with their big team-up of Batman and Superman, of course, the studio exec in them starts to tug at their collar like, oh, fuck. And they can't help but just start meddling. And that's exactly what happened. The management at Warner Brothers decided taking advantage of this personal tragedy for Snyder was the perfect opportunity to completely change his vision. And of course, it created a product that was trying to appeal more to a Marvel base as opposed to the more edgier, more serious, darker previous installments of the Zack Snyder DC movies. And of course, that disinterested a lot of Zack Snyder's fans, and then it also disinterested more Marvel fans because they're looking at it like, not only is the storytelling rushed, but also the technical aspects alone. Holy fuck, this looks terrible. It's not funny. Jesus Christ, what's wrong with Superman's face? They ultimately released a movie that wasn't really for anyone, and in fact, some people in an article were like, yeah, no one really wanted to admit how much of a piece of shit Joss Whedon's version was, but you know, we made it this far. So after years of fans going out there going like, you know, release the Snyder Cut on Twitter, people debating like, is it even possible to get it made? Is the footage just sealed off from Warner Brothers? Then Zack Snyder himself going like, no, there's a cut. We just need an avenue to release it, right? And they petition even more. Finally, we get to the point where they announced that they were going to release the Snyder Cut on HBO Max. Originally, it was supposed to be 4 parts, like a TV miniseries, and now it's a 4-hour movie. And I was actually pretty excited going into this. Once the marketing was really starting to pick up, I was really excited to see this movie. I have not been the biggest fan of Snyder's previous DC movies. I rewatched every DC movie last year before Birds of Prey, and then I rewatched Snyder specifically as the marketing for this one was ramping up. And I'm not particularly a huge fan of Man of Steel anymore like I once was when I saw it in theaters back in 2013. I used to be one of the defenders of it. Like, you know, it's pretty good. I don't know what you guys are saying. And now I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm not sure why little old me back then saw that and was like, this is great. It's kind of dull and draggy and just kind of bleh, you know. Superman, I just have such a hard time connecting with this version of the character. And then Batman v Superman is a whole different kind of animal, you know. It's not necessarily draggy and dull like Man of Steel was. It's just more convoluted and complicated as far as like what's driving the plot forward. But a lot of what's driving the plot forward is kind of dumb and stupid. Like, there's faulty logic throughout, so it just kind of falls apart and everyone in the movie looks like a dumbass. And still, I have a hard time connecting with the Superman character. Nonetheless, though, despite my feelings about those two movies, I was excited to see this vision come out because it's going to be 4 hours. We were going to be able to finally, like, associate what was Snyder's in the original cut. We're going to call it Josstice League. If I refer to the 2017 movie again, it's Josstice League, emphasis on Joss, so we don't have to say original cut and all that shit. And everything in the marketing looked really great for this, so I was really excited to see it. And yes, this is obviously vastly superior to Josstice League. Just technically alone, it looks so much better. I thought I was going to be distracted by the 4:3 just because I'm so used to bigger movies being wide. You very rarely see big movies, especially comic book movies, do something different with their aspect ratio. But of course, this was to get every single piece of Zack Snyder's cinematography, every single shot they shot, in the movie, because they shot it in IMAX and they didn't want to crop it just to do widescreen. They want the full image, so that's why it's 4:3. And it looks great. Like, it's not distracting at all. I was watching it and I was like, this is just how it is, and it looks pretty damn good. The CGI, much better. Zack Snyder never really makes a movie that has bad visual effects throughout. You know, for the most part, you're getting stuff that looks really good, and you're just constantly looking at it like, I am really drawn to this imagery here. The cinematography looks great, the color grading, even though, of course, it is a muted color palette. However, what they had on screen just visually looked really great. It didn't look like someone was throwing up like a red airhead all over the screen for like the final climax of the movie, unlike Justice League. I can't say that this movie's like entirely visually perfect, though. There are still a couple of moments where I was like, yeah, that visual effects wise doesn't really look the greatest, and you know, sometimes when I see Cyborg, it doesn't look all that good, but for the most part, everything looks better, including Cyborg. In fact, Cyborg as a character in this movie is much better. In Justice League, he's like, yeah, I'm just kind of here, I'm kind of brooding, and then that's kind of it. He's kind of a boring character, but in this, he really is like the main character of the movie. Like, he goes through the most personal turmoil. So much happens tragically with him, and you're able to feel his pain and connect through Ray Fisher's performance in that way. But it's also great to see him change as the movie progresses, to see him interact with all of these guys. He really was the character in this movie where if he's in a scene, then I'm immediately kind of drawn to him. I want to know what he does next, because Ray Fisher gives a really fantastic performance. They really did make a much better character in this movie. I was instantly drawn to him. I want to see more of him. I know there's like a snafu behind the scenes going on, and I'm just saying, like, we need to like clear up this behind the scenes drama as soon as possible. The people that need to be held accountable need to do that so we can get more Ray Fisher Cyborg, because I want to see more of the guy. Even Barry Allen's The Flash was improved immensely in this. In Justice League, there's ideas for jokes that Joss Whedon always has when he does, like, you can pick up, like, oh yeah, this is the kind of comedic writing he does for, like, those Avengers movies. I get that. I get his sense of humor. I get what he's trying to do with the characters. But in the movie, it always felt like, you know, the actors, when they deliver these lines, they're not really selling it, because this isn't really what they signed up for. They signed up for some humor. The Flash is funny in this movie, and made me laugh consistently. But the humor in Justice League, I don't think these actors really care to do these lines, or they're just not suited, because they see these characters differently, and now they're being forced to say these other lines that don't really mesh with some of the tone of it. Zack Snyder and Chris Terrio definitely knew how to balance some of the lighter moments of this movie, but also the overall tone of a little more dramatic and a little more darker, while having its moments of fun. They handle it much better in this. It's honestly kind of incredible to think about all of the good that's in this movie, and any Warner Brothers exec going like, yeah, we need to reshoot like most of the movie though. Let's bring in Joss Whedon to reshoot most of the movie. Like, if you're a studio exec, you're probably thinking like, you know, certain movies have to be a certain time to get as many showings in a day as possible, and it can't be like too long because of that. I understand that kind of thinking. It's their job to think that way and intrude on people's visions, I guess. As weird as that is to phrase it like that. So I can understand maybe suggesting, like, let's make it shorter, let's cut some stuff out, but to redo so much in this movie is kind of weird, because a lot of this works, especially Cyborg, especially The Flash. Aquaman, I think, works a lot better. It leads into the Aquaman movie, I think, a little better too than where Justice League kind of left it. You know, Aquaman isn't like, for half of it, kind of brooding and kind of like, angry tough guy, and then immediately switches to like, my man, I'm drunk as fuck and I'm just hanging out with the boys. Like that's kind of like the vibe I got from him in Justice League. In this, he's very consistent. He's the skeptic of them. He's the more kind of real, down to earth, like, I could care less to be here, but I kind of have to be kind of attitude, and it works much better here. He vibes off of everyone really well. Even Bruce Wayne and Diana Prince in this movie, they have better chemistry in this, because there's moments in Justice League where they decided to have them kind of at odds with each other, where they kind of argue, and then they have scenes later where they're like having like personal heart-to-hearts, and that's kind of stripped from that for this movie. And I can understand what Joss Whedon was maybe trying to go for. They're trying to angle the Ben Affleck wants out of this project. I mean, Bruce Wayne wants to commit suicide because he feels guilty over what happened to Superman, so he forms a team, so he knows that everyone will be fine if he's gone, some shit like that. I can understand wanting to have a more personal angle with, like, their interactions butting heads, but for this cut, it definitely was not needed. It wasn't something that was missed. I think the project works much better with how Bruce and Diana are handled in this movie. There's certain things that I feel like were kind of maybe unresolved as far as like certain character motivations by the end of the movie. Like certain lines are said to Diana near the end that seem like they're really affecting her, but we don't, like in the movie's context, we don't see like any resolution to that. And there's a couple other things that pop up, like I was wondering, like, are they going to like officially say this is what this character was doing the whole time, or are they just kind of leaving it open? Steppenwolf, I understand that he's been outcast. He owes Darkseid about 50,000 more worlds in order for him to return home. That's like his family. But I don't really know why he cares that much about them. They mention that he tried to betray Darkseid, and he's like, I was wrong for that. But you never know, like, what was the extent of that to, like, not end up in prison, not be executed immediately, but just be conquering worlds for Darkseid, you know? Like, what's the extent of this relationship here? Also, I vaguely remember that a part of the reason why Steppenwolf wanted the mother boxes was because the essence of his mother was in them, and that was something that wasn't really in Justice League. They kind of hinted at it, though, and in this, it's, like, not there at all. And it's like, okay, they went with a totally different narrative direction here, I understand that. He's just kind of like this pathetic villain. They set him up as, like, a pathetic, like, easily, like, the heroes will be able to easily defeat him, but he's still kind of a big threat. And they added in enough for you to be like, okay, I understand the dynamic here on the most basic level. I wish there was maybe a bit more backing him to make him a much more interesting villain, though. But still, Steppenwolf is much better here. The performance from Ciarán Hinds works a lot better. The design, I don't know what the fuck they were thinking with Justice League doing that whole redesign of him. He looked fucking awful in that. It's not really just like, oh my god, they changed something from Zack Snyder's original. It's just they replaced this version with something that looked terrible. But this version of Steppenwolf visually just looks so much better. You feel like that grunt force, that ferociousness that he has, the suit of like bladed armor, like looks really good. You feel tension whenever he's around. The action scenes also, they look much better. They're much better handled. They're much more entertaining to look at too. It's a part of the reason why the visual effects being better helps, because then you can look at the action and go like, this is all working. They even changed certain things in the climax where I was like, that works so much better than what we got originally. Why was any of this changed, you know? Like, honestly, it really does baffle me. Like, there's a lot of good stuff in this movie. Like, there's something they do in the climax that, like, shocked me that they were even going with. I was like, oh my god, this is actually kind of cool. It develops another character's powers in a way that's interesting and hints at what's more to come with them. It's such a ballsy way to go about this climax. Why was any of this changed? Holy shit. Why was there a Russian family in Justice League? Nowhere. No, there's no people to save in the final battle. Thank Christ. Along with, like, there's certain visual effects that don't really work, though. Like, there's a couple things visually, as I mentioned earlier, that were like, I think that could have been touched up a bit more. There's even some ways that this movie is edited where I was like, I'm not really sure about that. A lot of it is Zack Snyder's personal style, though there's a lot of slow-mo. But the thing about slow-mo is that you kind of need to use that sparingly, or you're using it a lot to emphasize, hey, look at this. This is something that's happening right under your eye. Pay attention to it, and it works because you have to pick up on this visual language. But a lot of times Zack Snyder just does it because it's like, hey, look, posing, 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 and it's like, it kind of gets old after a while. The scene with Wonder Woman saving the hostages at the bank, for some reason that was kind of distracting to me. I'm not really sure like what the difference was between that or Justice League. Maybe they are edited the same, and because I'm looking at it in a different aspect ratio, different context, it was just different to me. It just didn't really look like the editing on that, how she's moving around really quickly, beating people up. Like, I think we can tone that down a bit. And that scene, okay, there's moments of cheesiness in this too, you know, where she does this a lot in slow-mo, where she's doing the wrist bang. There's like 5 different shots of her doing that in slow motion throughout the movie, and she vaporizes the dude. In the original Justice League, she just does it, the scene cuts to another moment in the plot, and you don't see what happens to the guy. In this, they show you like, oh no, he dissolved. Like, the building blew up, like, there's property damage now. Wonder Woman caused property damage just to kill this one guy that she could have easily just punched in the face. And then immediately after, she just vaporizes this guy. A little girl walks up to her and is like, I want to be just like you when I grow up. And she's like, you can be anything you want to be. including a fucking murderer, apparently, who causes property damage. Like, unnecessary property damage. Like, she didn't need to do that shit right then. Like, come on, you should know better. I thought you were trying to hide still. Or maybe not. But there's other moments, too, where, like, the editing and, like, the tone that Snyder is going for kind of clash, and it creates something kind of cheesy, but not in a way that's kind of, like, likable. Like, Shazam is pretty cheesy, but, like, it kind of matches the tone of everything going on in that. In this, it's kind of like, we're being artful, but it's kind of like, oh, like there's a lot of slow-mo cinematography and filmmaking of scenes of just characters doing very basic things that you could probably get across to the audience much quicker, but they're also playing pop songs over it, like The Flash saving Iris West, which is pretty good, but they linger on him staring at her for so long. It's kind of like, can we please just have him save her now? Please, we can cut the song. We don't need it to last this long. I know he has all the time in the world, literally, but I don't want to see this all the way through. There's a moment Aquaman is walking down that pier, and he's drinking and smashing on the ground, waves crashing up, slow-mo taking his shirt off, staring off in the ocean, not him jumping in, but waves just crashing up to him, and then there's a shot of his face when the song hits the lyrics of The King. Do you get it? And stuff like that made me laugh, not intentionally. Not a joke that they intentionally put in. It's an unintentional laugh. There's moments of exposition that I understand you gotta have it, but it's kind of the way it's edited. It sounds like someone just stepped into the ADR booth. Like, there's a certain sound to not just them speaking, but the environment they're in when they start the exposition, but then it cuts to them doing like flashbacks and montages, and you can tell like the actor is now speaking clearly in what sounds like an ADR booth with no real attempt to make the editing sound better. I don't know. That might just be a nitpick from me, though. I don't know. The last thing I can really mention negatively without spoiling anything is that there's a couple of moments where certain performances are maybe a little too wooden, and I wish there was a bit more life in them. Like, there's a certain line reading in Justice League with Wonder Woman where she goes, "Kal-El, no!" And it's brought in this, so it was a Zack Snyder thing, and it was like, man, that was like, you could have cut that out, and I would not have cared. Like, we don't need someone going like, "Cal, don't do it." Although a better line reading would have definitely helped. Like, but there's a couple smaller moments like that throughout the movie where I was like, man, I think that line read could have used like another take. There must be another take somewhere, right? Before I go into anything else that could be spoilery, I just wanted to clarify, I really did enjoy a lot of this movie. You know, a lot of the action works great. The score by Tom Holkenborg, oh my gosh, it's incredible. I'm a big fan of Danny Elfman whimsical as much as anyone else, and I didn't mind his score at all in Justice League. Like the scene with the Flash running around and Danny Elfman's scores doing the whimsy thing. It's like, yeah, I'm fine with that. But Holkenborg's, it's much better. It's so much better, and it matches the tone of everything, and I think it perfectly matches the visuals of the scene. It's just all around. Why would anyone fire him for Danny Elfman? As much as I have a soft spot for the man, just why would they get rid of Hulkenberg? Whatever. Visual effects look a lot better. The actors seem like they're more in their element here. The writing for their characters works. The characters are all more interesting. The 4-hour runtime is actually very much so needed to flesh out all of these characters. Even though they don't have solo movies leading up to this, that given time in the beginning actually works so that they don't really need that. You're getting to know these characters in the beginning. You see them slowly all meet up. Okay, I get it. You know, that there's some really good writing going on here. Overall, it is a much better project than Justice League, but I was almost at the point where I was like, I might give this like a solid, like maybe B- or B, something like that. There is some Snyderisms that I just personally don't really care for, but a lot of fans will really love it. But then some other things start to happen, and that's what kind of pushed it over. And this is where we're going to get into some spoilery stuff. So if you have not seen Zack Snyder's Justice League yet, click off the video and go watch it, and then come back to this part. Okay, so there's some like what I feel like is like fan service over logic kind of issues here. Superman, there's no real reason for him to really put on the black suit. Like, he just kind of walks back into his ship real quick and is like, I kind of prefer this one. I understand it's a famous visual from the comics that he put on a black suit at one point, but as far as the movie goes, like, there's no real reason for him to do it, just it looks kind of cool. Although I did like Lois Lane better in this movie, as far as like they explore her grief and how she's processing it. It works a lot better for his return too. They work much better here, even though it is kind of limited screen time for Superman, but I think it plays much better than the CGI lip. and some of the cornier kind of jokes, even though Henry Cavill did a good job in Justice League delivering some of those like "I'm Superman" kind of lines. Like, I think for this movie's tone, that contradicts what Zack Snyder had established in this. I think it fits better for what we've already gotten. But also, there's still that moment from Justice League where Cyborg's defense systems are kicking in. Like, I can't control it. My defense systems are going to shoot at Superman because they deem him a threat. But it's like, there's no other moment where something is deemed a threat and he can't control himself. You know what I mean? It just seems like we need to get this fight going, so let's just have this happen, even if it's not part of the narrative, really. And we also imply that Cyborg's like super smart and is controlling every single computer with ease that he's come in contact with, except for himself, apparently. And if that was something that they would dwell on a bit more, then yeah, sure, let's go with it. But that's still like a random thing that just kind of happens. Also, Martian Manhunter. I said spoilers, right? Spoilers. Martian Manhunter is in this movie. I believe, I might not have this backstory right, but I believe it was, people theorized that the Colonel in Man of Steel, that was Martian Manhunter. You know, people make theories for everything. And Zack Snyder read that theory and was like, you know what, I wasn't really thinking about that, but sure, fuck it. Martian Manhunter. And now that's just canon, that guy is Martian Manhunter. And I think that's just a problem of, first of all, like, if you're gonna have a character like Martian Manhunter, I feel like you have to do a finer job of introducing him into this. Like, you can't just look at another character in another movie that people might have even forgotten about and just go, Martian Manhunter now, yeah, now this is a thing. Because literally, the way they introduce it, there's a good scene with Martha Kent talking with Lois Lane. It's actually kind of sweet, it's very good, but it's truncated. That scene is ended with the reveal that Martha Kent was Martian Manhunter, just going like, everyone needs to get back into the world, Lois. Everyone. And just, he turns back into the Colonel and walks away. He was not talking to anyone. He was talking like to the audience pretty much. And it was like, what the fuck is it? Like, if you did not know who Martian Manhunter was, that scene would have confused the shit out of you. Like, you probably wouldn't have even recognized the Colonel afterwards. You would have just been like, what is this? If you're gonna introduce a character like this, you kind of have to set the groundwork for it. You can't just go like, well, people will recognize him, and people did a fan theory based off of vague character writing for the Colonel in Man of Steel. Sure, that's Martian Manhunter, why the fuck not? Doesn't really explain why he didn't come out of hiding for like the events of Man of Steel where the future was unknown. Maybe someone should step in and help Superman. Or, hey, this nuke didn't blow up Doomsday. Maybe I should reveal myself because Batman and Superman might not be able to take this shit. But now, of course... Actually, no, he doesn't even come in for, like, the Justice League battle, too. This is just like, we just want a scene with him talking to Lois Lane. He's Martian Manhunter, and then he comes back later for another scene, not, like, anything important to the plot. We'll talk about that after I talk about my next big issue with this movie, and that is the epilogue. Now, the epilogue starts off pretty good. Cyborg, they're ending Cyborg's arc really well. Like, yes, this is good. I can't wait to see more of him. Hopefully, you know, ending the characters off in a good spot. They show the post-credit scene from Justice League, but the dialogue has changed. Instead of Lex Luthor hinting at Deathstroke like, we should have a league of our own, right? Instead, it's changed up, and it's like, oh shit, this was probably the premise for Ben Affleck's Batman, maybe. And that would have been so interesting. It'd be cool if we could see this story maybe play out, but I know Ben Affleck, he might not be keen on returning after his appearance in The Flash because this role took a lot on him emotionally, mentally, so we'll see. And I thought that was it. I thought the movie was about to end. They put the post-credit scene at the end of the movie before the credits played, so okay, movie's about to end. And I forgot that there's supposed to be another nightmare scene. They play another dream sequence that Batman has, and it is a dream sequence. He wakes up in a cold sweat, like, oh shit, I just had another dream. But this, like, at least in BVS, as much as that also just doesn't make sense to me, I don't know why Bruce Wayne is getting these specific premonitions, but at least that, like, it visually looks really good. This was very obviously a reshoot, and it shows. Like, I hate to say it because I know Zack Snyder wanted to put everything in, like, we may not ever get Justice League 2, so I want to show the fans what I had in mind, and I will defend his right to put it in the movie, but I can't defend how it overall plays. The visual effects look bad. The characters constantly look like they're on a green screen environment, and just ultimately, I'm not a fan of just these two dream sequences that we've gotten from Bruce Wayne. Cyborg had a similar kind of, like, nightmare kind of vision earlier on in the movie, but in the context of the movie, it actually kind of makes sense. Like, hey, Mother Boxes might be fucking with his brain, giving him a version of the future that's pretty scary. And I was like, that's actually a good hint of a movie to come. and having it actually work in this movie's narrative, because I know Zack Snyder wanted to make a whole movie in this post-apocalypse. I don't really care for how Bruce Wayne is getting them. They're just so specific, and it doesn't help that it visually just looks awful. And then after that, once Bruce Wayne wakes up, I'm like, okay, they're closing out the movie. Then Martian Manhunter flies down, and he's like, Bruce Wayne, hey, what's up? I'm tired of hiding. Some people call me Martian Manhunter. We gotta find the anti-life equation before Darkseid does. There's a war coming. Alright, got a blast. And he flies on out of there. And it's like, why were you here? You had that one scene where if people don't know who you are, they'll be confused as shit, but also narratively, like, I get it's a character from the comics, but they did a poor job just introducing him, and now they're bringing him in just for obvious exposition of, there's gonna be more to this story. Maybe we'll see how the rest of this weekend goes if Warner Brothers makes any kind of announcement on Justice League 2. I know Restore the Snyderverse is trending, but it's not a sure thing. But also, like, maybe that's just me. If I was Zack Snyder, I'd be like, this isn't really a sure thing anymore. Maybe we should just make it like one complete movie instead of something that is hinting at more, which is also a downside to BVS, what BVS was kind of doing. Maybe we should cut it out. But more than that, I'm looking at this and I'm like, this story wrapped up once Lex Luthor told Deathstroke this specific thing. Why are you now elongating the movie to do this? It's literally just sequel teasing that I'm just not a fan of. If you're gonna tease sequels, there's a way to do it where it's like, okay, I get it. Like, it kind of works for how the rest of this movie was going. Or you can do it vaguely, kind of mysteriously, where you're like, hey, that's actually a good little tease you got there. The way it's done here is just like, hey, this is potentially gonna be another story. Get ready, audience. I'm just gonna exclaim it to you right here and right now. Like, at that point I was like, okay, they had some really good stuff going, but what they decided to do at the end, once again, I'm grateful that Snyder got his vision told, because that's just such a win for filmmakers that have been screwed over by the studio. Now there's potentially hope that more people could get their visions unstudio meddled out there. But as I said earlier, as much as I can defend his right to do it, I can't really defend how it plays, especially if I personally am not a big fan of what you're doing. Some of this is just I'm not particularly a big fan of Zack Snyder's style with these DC movies. I really enjoyed 300, Legend of the Guardians. I really like that movie, and Watchmen I finally watched recently. Pretty solid movie. I haven't read the graphic novel, but that was a pretty solid movie. I'm not a hater of Zack Snyder at all, and I definitely see the potential in the DC movies he's made. It's just I haven't really been a big fan of their execution at all. This is definitely my favorite one out of them. After watching it only once, obviously, I might rewatch it again this weekend, but I think it still suffers from a lot of the issues that his previous DC movies have had. But if you're a big fan of those movies, then you'll really love this. I know a lot of people have been loving this. I can only speak for me, though. I'm gonna give Zack Snyder's Justice League a C+. There's a ton to really enjoy about this, and the 4 hours really do fly by. It's very entertaining. There's not really a moment where you're bored or you feel like this should be cut out of the movie. Everything I think really works. It's just those scenes near the end of the movie, the last 10, 15, 20 minutes, however long it was, like, yeah, that's kind of pushing it, especially since visual effects wise it has taken a step down here. There's also some other narrative choices taken throughout the movie and decisions as far as behind the camera goes where I was kind of just at odds with it. But overall, I think a lot of people will enjoy this movie, and I definitely recommend it. But if you've seen Zack Snyder's Justice League, leave in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.